I woke up the next day to the sound of giggling. I got up from my cot in the house of a thousand smells and walked to the water bowl to splash some good old lukewarm water in my face, washing away the lingering wisps of sleepiness. When I was firmly anchored to the here and now, I walked out. I stood on the top of the 2 small steps leading out of the barracks. Immediately to my left were the giggling girls. Jane, who'd made it back to the sept at some point after leaving us with the laptop last night, and Stephanie. I realize I haven't given you the full picture of the girl, so let me do this now. She was a kinfolk, just a couple years older than Jane. She occasionally handled cleaning, like the morning she had met Jane, if you recall that odd encounter, but usually she's out there hunting, or helping out at the butchery or tanning stations. Quite handy with a knife, that one. She was also the daughter of our own resident Get of Fenris warrior, Thunderdrop and his wife, Miriam. As our worm foe, Thunderdrop was in charge of the local fight against the worm, coordinating information gathering, like scouting, as well as the Sept's offensive initiatives. Last night's outing to take out Evan had to be run by him first. Likewise, everything we learned by working with Jane, we report right back to him. As for her mother, Miriam, she was at least as much of a warrior than her husband, just without the shapeshifting. As a kinfolk, she did not have an official position on the Sept, even though she'd have made a hell of a warrior. But we all thought of her as the second in command, right after Stormclaw, on matters of care and security. While she couldn't order Garou around, at least officially, she organized the fighters amongst the kinfolk into a second layer of unofficial guardians. If anything got past the spirits and the Garou, they'd also have to get past a line of kinfolks armed to the teeth. And I do mean each individual tooth. She scared me, but I liked her. Fuck it, I'll say it out loud. In a fight, I'd rather have her at my side than quite a few full-fledged Garou. That's not dissing on them. She's just that amazing. Anyway, enough about the parents. Evidently, in the past few weeks, Jane had somehow befriended Stephanie. Good on them. Moving my gaze further away and to my right, I scanned the tables and dining area. I hadn't had time to talk to Molly after her uncle had recently let it slip, between trying to punch my lights out, that she might have a thing for me. A thing that I hadn't dared to hope for. I spotted her and, well, she spotted me. Our eyes met. Another day, I would have probably chickened out, looked away, but not today. Today, I knew. Today I hoped. And that changed everything. I held her gaze long enough that I didn't realize when the giggling stopped, or when Stephanie let out a, "Oh, damn," in our general direction. Molly did, I think. She smiled and summoned me with a nod before more people noticed. I went over and played it cool as I sat down on the table like I would on any other morning. A few minutes later, she put a warm plate on the table and a much warmer kiss right on my lips. She receded, caressed my cheek, and walked away with a cheeky, flirtatious, "About time, Horus." And just like that, we were now a thing. We'd have tons of things to discuss, and there would be tribal politics to consider. Yes, but fuck all of that. We had kissed, and I did not give a damn about anything else. No sooner was she gone than Jane and Stephanie joined me. "So, what's new?" asked Stephanie like she didn't just witness that. "Oh, well, there's this big thing that just happened." Yeah, Yeah, we bagged us a black spiral dancer, I answered teasingly. Nothing else comes to mind. She laughed as I tried to keep the act up, but I was grinning like a damned idiot. I'm happy for you, Horus, Jane said sincerely. Love is a wonderful thing. Whoa there. Things just began happening. Let's not throw big words around, I said, alarmed. Don't worry, Horus, Stephanie said, backing up Jane. This has been a long time coming. You don't have to worry. I'm not worried. It's just, I literally just woke up. This is a lot, I said, much to Jane's amusement. And there's a lot left to figure out. Not to mention, her uncle is going to kill me. Nah, I got you, Horus, Steph said, turning towards Molly, who was helping someone else to some food and aspirin. Hey, Malls, you got plans tonight? Molly looked back towards us with a smirk. She'd have to have heard the whole bit. Hey, Steph, she replied. Yeah, my new boyfriend is taking me somewhere nice, somewhere we can talk and figure things out. I am? I said, confused. Yes, of course I am. What's the matter, Horus? Molly said playfully while walking back to us. Big bad werewolf, afraid the maiden is going to bite back? That earned general laughter around us. I must have turned several shades of color because she put her hand on my shoulder and said, Don't worry, we're just having a bit of fun. You and I will talk it out tonight, and I'll have a stern conversation with Stormclaw. I heard what he did, and I am not okay with that. I squeezed her hand, and she left again to help someone else. Sarah and I spoke to a spirit this morning. Jane began, sensing it was time for a change of subject, something for which I was grateful. Must have been good training then. What for? Oh, we reached out to Deceptive the Concrete Bindings for help with the laptop's password. They're sending Buzzwood over this afternoon. That's wonderful news. Maybe we'll make some headway. In the meantime, Steph, I was wondering if you could ask your dad to talk to Jane about the Fenrir. Way ahead of you, Jane answered in her stead. You are? I asked, confused again. Yeah, she asked me herself, Steph answered in her stead. But Dad's too busy and Mom's too scary, so we came to a compromise. I'm going to teach her myself about us, Fenrir. Oh, that works, I agreed. It's why we're here, Jane added. We were waiting for you to get up in case you had things to add as we go. Yeah, sure. We can do that in a bit. Let me get some coffee in me first. Just as I said that, a warm mug landed in front of me. What can I say? Molly's just the ding-dang best. I mouthed thank you as she drifted on to yet another hungry werewolf. I gotcha, she mouthed back. I wanted to get up, to hold her, to talk right now. But Jane needed mentoring, and I needed to touch base with my pack, and Buzzword was underway apparently. Sometimes being a werewolf is hard, you know? You just don't always get what you want. I finished my meal, trying real hard to focus on Jane's needs. Lest we forget, she'd just learned about werewolves a mere couple of weeks ago. She still had a lot to catch up on, and it looks like the fight against the worm was about to heat up. At least, we hoped it would. Whatever we'd find on the laptop would either make or break the case, as they say. We moved to a more secluded area before we got to talk about the controversial topic of the Get of Fenris. Don't get me wrong. I owe my life several times over to Thunderdrop, and I would put it in his hands in a pinch. But the tribe overall has done some effed up shit in the past, and as a result ended up with a reputation which is occasionally warranted based on the individuals. And it wouldn't be fair to Jane to just brush past all that. She deserved to know all about it. For all we knew, she'd be chosen by Fenrir. She had to know what she may end up getting herself into. I feel like we have to start with the big one. The strength thing, Stephanie began. The quick version is, we're really into strength, which often leads to an oversimplification, reducing us to hulking brutes and idiots, like we're just the shallow vanilla werewolves. Well, I'm no werewolf, but those of us who are, you know what I mean. I'm trying to give you their perspective. Jane nodded her understanding. To be fair, that isn't entirely unwarranted. We have our share of brawny brutes who just want to clobber enemy heads violently, but A, that's not all of our Garou, and B, some of them pretend to be that way because C, someone has to do it. The worm doesn't play fair. It never has. The worm doesn't wait for us to carefully dance around notions of right or wrong and philosophy and whatnot. At the end of the day, some heads need to pop because we're losing this war and there's more and more and more heads to pop and fewer teeth and claws to pop them with. When you need the best warriors who won't hesitate, and that's a hell of a lot more frequent than most like to admit, you need Fenris warriors. And surprise, surprise, living with all that violence is actually not fucking easy to do. She paused to stop herself from being too worked up. Look, it's a good thing you're getting a kin to talk, because no Garou would ever admit to this. Trauma is trauma. Doesn't matter if you're a 9-foot-tall murder machine that can regenerate getting shot in the face by a shotgun point blank. You still got shot in the face by a shotgun blast. For starters, it takes a unique brand of heroes to laugh it off and get in line for the next shotgun blast to the face. That's us. And I'm sorry, but you have no idea the mental and moral strain that takes out of someone. Not yet, anyway. Coping with that requires two things. One, a ridiculously strong support network that's your pack and your kinfolks. And two, a whole lot of acting like you're the toughest son of a bitch there ever was until you die proving it. Or survive long enough to genuinely believe it. Regarding the first thing, that's why you'll never find a Garou more in love with their spouses and their children, more ready to give and sacrifice anything and everything for them. They have to be, because that love, that need to protect them is why they do it. It's where they draw their strength from. You can afford to shrug off a shotgun blast to the face when you know you're taking it, so that someone you love never has to. Every motherfucking Fumurai or Bane you kill can't threaten your spouse, your kids, your pack, or your sept, and that will always be a win. And that right there is our entire thing. We bleed so others don't have to. You gotta be willing to sacrifice anything to win this war. Which means you gots to be willing to sacrifice yourself first. Always. And at all times. Wow, okay. I see. That covers the first part, the support network and family, pretty damn well. What about the second bit, the bravado? Jane asks. Was there more to that? Oh yes. Right. Don't get me wrong. All Garou are tough. But the Fenrir, they have to be tougher. And if they aren't, they'll fake it if they have to. And they have to. As I said, they can't flinch when the next shotgun blast comes. And that means acting tough even when you've had enough. We don't back down, ever. To achieve this, the Fenrir test themselves regularly and violently for that purpose. At informal moots, the pure celebrations of life we hold just for fun, the warriors run games that really aren't for the faint of heart. They play tug of war with barbed wires. They do what they call the razor dance. They challenge each other to arm wrestling over silver blades. I mean, for fuck's sakes, we even have a tradition of skinning ourselves to make armor out of our own hides. But don't mistake the willingness to bleed for righteous cause with madness. We aren't mindless psychos. We feel that pain. But we can't afford to slow down because we're afraid of it. The worm won't wait. Hell, Fenris won't wait. Our totem is not kind. He is not patient. He is not fun. He's harsh and deadly and unforgiving, and he demands of his chosen warriors that they be the same. Fenris will not rest until the worm is slain, and he won't let us either. Either we win this war or we die. That's the way of Fenris. It doesn't make us shallow or stupid or mindlessly murderous. It doesn't mean we can't show kindness or love or have fun. Hell, we desperately need to. But it does mean we must be strong at all times. The other side of that coin is that you do not abide weakness, I added, which is a problem. Stephanie looked at me a little weary of what I was about to say. Fenrir is an extreme spirit. He doesn't tolerate weakness. He believes in might makes right. More to the point, he believes in calling the weak. And that's at the source of two very important and problematic things you must know about the Fenrir. Look, I can't sugarcoat this. I can't and I won't. The Fenrir have this notion that it's a good thing to attack other Karens. They fucking what? Jane said, her eyes wide in horror, fury, and disbelief. Stephanie didn't say anything. She didn't look at me either, so I continued. It's what I was referring to when we were talking about the litany. They attack Garou Karens to test their defenses, I explained. If they can take it, the reasoning is that the Garou who had been holding it were just too weak, and now the Karen is better off under their protection. Jane looked at Stephanie, her eyes pleading her to disprove me. He's not wrong, she said. But it's not like we want to invade or do it for fun. We do it to make sure all the Karens are properly defended. If a Karen can stand its ground against us, we back off. No harm, no foul. You mean besides a couple of dead Garou on both sides? I countered. If they were strong, they would have made it, she countered. Bullshit, I almost snapped. Could be they were shit out of luck and outnumbered, or they were still healing from killing 1,000 Banes barehanded the night before, or any number of valid reasons that have nothing to do with weakness and did not justify their deaths. We'll never know how many great heroes never had a chance to rise because of this madness. I was getting worked up over this, so Jane gave me a look. Not in a challenging way, just in a, hey, no need to frenzy kind of way. Stephanie wisely gave me time to master myself. Look, she finally said, I'm not saying it's ideal, but it is the way that Fenris taught us. If you don't like it, try challenging him over it. The very idea of going up against a giant chained wolf did give me a bit of a cold shower. Problem is, she was somewhat right. I didn't have to love it, but Gaia does have her brutal side too. Nature isn't always kind or nurturing. Storms sink ships full of people for no other reason than they happen to be there. We often speak of her plentiful bounty, but her fruits can kill you just as well as feed you. Fenrir was a Gaian patron. He was chosen by Gaia to fight at her side, and he was willing to do that at all costs, even the costs of our own lives. He had a purpose, and he fulfilled it to a fault, and so did his children. But what I said was, fine, let's move on. Another thing about strength, she said, quickly moving on to another subject. We understand there's more to it than brawn. Of course, it's what we need the most, and our folks need to be able to stand on their own battle-wise, but we respect other kinds of strength. A wise old strategist might not be able to stand toe-to-toe with a Black Spiral dancer anymore, but if they can outwit them, or outthink them, then that's still useful. Heck, we even respect skilled poets and their ability to inspire greatness. It doesn't matter what your strength is. If you don't back down and contribute to the fight, you're fine in our books. That applies to any gender and any breed. We don't discriminate, although a lot of people think we do. We don't just test physical resilience. We test it all. Anyone who joins us gets harassed big time. If people can't take mean words or a few punches, they're not going to survive as a Fenrir or keep up with us in battle. And it's best for their own survival that they don't stick around. More than a few have turned away from us because of that, blaming us for hating whatever fits their description, but the truth is, we don't care. Anyone, and I mean anyone, who shows a spine and can tough through that is one of us. Period. We will stand next to them against anything and anyone. Gloria, Dreadorn, Vivid Keen, they may be Garou born, but neither my mom or my dad give a single fuck about that. They all proved they were solid. And Sarah, my dad loves Sarah, even if she's a peace-loving children of Gaia. She proved herself when she took over as Master of the Rite after the rendering. She survived where her predecessor died, and her knowledge of spirits is the strength that Karen needs. He's had her back since day one. And yeah, that's about it. I get a Fenris in a gist. She made to get up, studying Jane's features, wondering if anything she'd just learned would change anything about their friendship. In true Fenrir fashion, she had shown resolve. She had stood her ground. She hadn't shied away from what she was, and if that meant sacrificing their friendship, that's what would happen. She would take the hit and move on. I looked at both of them, and as they sized each other up, I thought it in their best interest to keep going. I knew there was more depth to the Fenrir that could be found in their history, so I said, maybe talk about your immortal enemy. Knowing about what you're fighting against may put a few more things into perspective. She turned her glance to me and thought about it for a moment, putting her thoughts together. Jane remained silent, still making her mind. She clearly was shaken to the core by some of what she'd heard, but she could also see what they saw, could admire the courage it took to do what they do, the price they pay to do it. Patiently, she waited to know more. Wotan, started Stephanie, was a king of man, tricked by the Ragabash Loki into believing the Fenrir wanted to rule over Asgard. Asgard? Jane interrupted. This is mythology. History, I corrected. Remember, human science sees what the Weaver wants them to see. As she gains in strength, reality hardens and sets into that static version of events humans believe in. Their history becomes an increasingly provable fact, but back then reality was malleable. What was observable truth in one part of the world wasn't everywhere, and that means different mythologies could be just as real. I gestured to Stephanie to keep going. In response, Wotan, whom you may know as Odin, since we're mentioning mythology, invaded and destroyed their homelands of Heimdall. After losing our home, we spread across Europe, and eventually the world. 1,000 years later, Odin returned, although he was no mere human anymore. Immortal and invested by power far beyond any others. He and his army could not be killed, for they came back to life. After a long war, In a series of hopeless battles, our best warriors merged into an image of great Fenris himself. In this form, they were able to best Odin and separate his body in several parts, hoping it would prevent him from getting back up. But even that wasn't enough. Woden returned during the Dark Ages. This time, great Fenris himself, not an image conjured up by the heroism of his chosen, he came to us and built an army to chase Woden across the world. We met his armies. We faced him in battle. But it was a trap. The Woden died, crushed by a boulder thrown by Fenris himself. Our patron was pulled through the gauntlet, into the Umbra, where the traitor Tyr, one of the greatest of Fenrir warriors, was waiting to bind the beast in silver chains. We defeated the army of Wotan, but it was too late. Fenris was bound. Wotan had succeeded in preventing Fenris from ever again coming to us in the physical world, and more importantly, from manifesting at the end of days on the plains of the apocalypse, stripping Gaia of her best chance of making it. As for the immortal king, he was destroyed, but his soul remains. We await the day of his final return. And surely it must be soon, for in November of 1998, a red star appeared in the umbral sky, what some call Anthelios, and take to be a sign of the coming apocalypse, we call the burning eye of Wotan. He is watching, preparing one last assault before the end. I could see Jane calculating, understanding the stakes a little better, understanding their patron a little better. She could see where they were coming from. Whatever she might have thought about the Fenrir, her friendship with Stephanie at least seemed safe. They talked a lot on that on the way back, about the meaning of sacrifice and heroism, love, and family. There's more, actually, Stephanie ended up saying. Since we're coming clean, several decades ago, some of our own fell hard into the notion that might makes right and how we were superior to all others. They fell and sided with the Nazis of all things. For a while there, Fenrir, Garou, and kin got involved in the humans of World War II. The Sword of Heimdall, they were called. Jane had stopped walking. Another black stain in the Fenrir's bloody past. Listen, I know how that sounds like, Stephanie sighed. But here's the thing. We as a tribe, we fight for what's right, and that wasn't it. Combat the worm wherever it dwells and whenever it breeds. The most important tenet. When I say we are committed, that we're ready to sacrifice anything, I mean it. Fenrir fought Fenrir for a very long time over this. We did not give up until we could be sure, without any possible doubt, that this evil had been well and truly excised. The swords of Heimdall are no more, dead to the last. If you remember nothing else about us, remember this. We are harsh, yes. We are brutal, yes. But we are true, and we are pure, and we do good. And we will win this war. Damn! The kid knew how to make a closing argument. I'll give her that. By the time we returned to the common area, there was a loud commotion. I could hear Gloria arguing with Stormclaw. And nothing good could ever come from that. This has been A Rite to Remember, Season 2, Episode 15. A series of lore videos for Legacy Werewolf the Apocalypse, presented through an immersive narrative. There is just so much to unpack with the Get of Fenris. I tried to cram as much as I could in the episode above so you can see both the good and the bad and make up your own mind. There's a lot of problematic aspect to them, and Gaia knows many people hate them for it. And I get it. There's eugenics, there's edginess to the point of being ridiculous, and their freaking glyph is barely disguised Nazi symbols. Hell, even back in the 90s, White Wolf could see this was a problem, and they killed off the Sword of Heimdall. They didn't do enough, but they started on a path to fix the tribe. But here's the thing. You don't have to play with any of it. None of that bad stuff is essential to playing a Fenrir. It doesn't define the tribe. You don't have to side with any of the bad. Most of it is history anyway. What is core to the Fenrir, however, is everything else. It's what's left when you take out the stupid parts. Deep ties to your loved ones, contrasting the horror of your everyday life. And that's prime roleplay material. And no, despite popular opinion, that's not just playing Werewolf or just a Blend Martial tribe. Playing Fenrir is playing Werewolf cranked up to 11. It's Werewolf Redux. If you don't see the difference, then you are not cranking the dial high enough. With that said, here are a few more things I could not jam in there, starting with Fenrir himself, because there's weird stuff going on here. In the first edition, Fenris was a wolf spirit. He begat the Fenrir to call the humans hunting Gaia's wolves. And then in second edition, he was suddenly just a Garou, who was ascended to the status of patron by Gaia herself. That's a pretty damn huge retcon and introduces some questions that aren't really answered. Choose the version you prefer and just roll with it, I guess. Another big change is that in the first edition, they were very chauvinistic. There's even a camp called the Valkyria of Freya, whose text is all about how hard it is to believe that there are women in the tribe, and then a member of that camp talking about how much harder it is to be a woman amongst the Get. The revised tribe book attempts to course correct this to what I presented in the episode, but I don't think the writers coordinated well on that, and there's some first edition leftover baggage that should have just been left out. On page 49, you have a rite of passage section which talks about the harassment period, where the new pack mates make life as hard as they can for the newcomer, pretty much attempting to drive them out of the tribe. They make the point that they get flack for that, being accused of being sexist and hating on Garou born when in fact they're just testing folks' resolve. It specifies that all harassment ends once the Garou is proven they can take it. But then, they specifically state how they lose many women to the Black Furies because of that. But they don't mention how many men they lose to any other tribe, do they? The same logic is repeated a few pages later in the Garou-born section. Anyone who can prove they have what it takes is welcome and accepted, regardless of gender or breed, and yet the book feels the need to frame the acceptance of women as a relatively recent event, and proceeds to explain what led to that change in a kind of good but also mostly very bad sidebar on page 49, and then again in the Valkyria of Freya section on page 52. Not to mention this section on the Garou-born just had to include that because they can't have children, they can't really get it, and thus it's okay to see them as lower class. But they're fully accepted. But they're second class. But really they're fully accepted. Pick a Dan Lane revised tribe book. And all of that assumes the Garou can just change tribes like they change clothes. Oh, didn't like being harassed? Just go elsewhere, that's no biggie. It's not like Fenris himself chose you. This is literally in the same book where Uli Brightjaw is used as a cautionary tale. Convinced of his own weakness, Fenris eventually ripped his heart out, saying his weakness was not trusting in Fenris to choose someone strong. In other words, despite having a story all about this 40 pages before, the book forgets that patrons choose the Garou for their tribes, and therefore this whole entire harassment concept boils down to Fenrir warriors checking to see if this Garou, whom Fenris has specifically chosen, is good enough for the tribe. Feels like the tribe didn't get the memo from Uli's story. Another big difference between editions is that first edition barely mentions the Norse gods, or even tried to explain the ties to mythology. They were just born from Fenris, and little context is given to explain why in Norse mythology, Fenris is actually a major player in bringing about the end of the world. You know, the apocalypse, the exact thing the Garou are trying to stop. Some of that is cleared up in the second edition book, which states up front that humans are just wrong. This is where the rivalry with Roten was introduced. along with Tyr's role in binding Fenris, Loki's treachery, and many other mythological figures which at least get mentioned. That being said, I don't think it was the best solution to make the whole mythology wrong and turn its prime god into an evil immortal sorcerer / necromancer. This is a real mythology we're talking about. One that still has followers to this day. I doubt they are thrilled at this. Moving on to something that annoys me a lot. In the first edition book, they talk about the dangerous games at informal modes. If that sounds ridiculously edgy, wait until you hear how formal moods have an arena outside for formal challenges and challenges for Jarldom. It also mentions that those challenges are exclusively to the death. Meaning that according to that book, the Fenrir frequently murdered each other at moods. Let's do some math, shall we? Assuming even just one formal challenge per mood, that's 12 dead Fenrir a year. That's per sept, so how many septs are there in the world? We don't have a number for that, but we know that there are 3 Get a Fenris septs in Russia, which holds about 1/16 of the world's landmass. That's approximately 48 Fenris septs in the world, which means 576 dead Get a Fenris in a year, give or take. But wait, I hear some of you ask, how many Get a Fenris are there total? Well, the Storyteller's Handbook states that a small tribe like the Stargazers would have about 500 members, and a large tribe would have about 2,000. Let's put the Fenrir somewhere mid-range, at 1,000. And yep, that's more than half the tribe dying every year in formal challenges. Say we're generous, even if we cut that in half, with challenges every other mood. The tribe wipes itself out in 4 years. Good job. No wonder we're losing the war. Now settle down, because this episode is nowhere near done. There's a lot to be said about the truly baffling decision W5 took with this tribe. The Get are not playable. According to reports and articles we have, the leadership at Paradox saw all the Get of Fenris as evil fascists and did not know that the evil fascists were only a camp, the Sorns of Heimdall, and that the rest of the tribe eliminated them. Despite this, they wanted to make the Get into fascists' enemy. After all, who doesn't like to punch Nazis? That is, until the entire writing staff united to say, unanimously, fuck no. Look, don't get me wrong, fascism and Nazism deserve to be antagonists. But if you don't know the first thing about a tribe, you do not deserve to make calls about them. Even if you sign the paychecks, having money does not mean you know what you're talking about. In point of fact, recent history has been a showcase to the contrary. Time passed, and that team of writers were fired. A new team came in, and the decision was made that W5 would no longer be a continuation of Legacy Werewolf, even if it is in the same edition as V5, which itself was in continuity with Legacy Vampire. And so in the new version, the Get were turned into antagonists called the Cult of Fenris. Playing into their extremist aspect, they fell into this new state called Hoglosk, which is to say, they became even more extremely dedicated to their cause, slamming the door on the Garou nation's snout on the way out. Their position? You either join them in straight up murdering anything, even remotely tied to the worm, and to their eyes most things are, or you are part of the problem and you must die. In their wake, they leave only death and destruction, which of course only makes the worm smile and nod, urging them along to keep going. I mean, that's one way of dealing with the problematic aspects of the tribe. Make them irrevocably bad, and just don't deal with it at all, like they didn't deal with the Garou-born. But that leaves all the fans of the tribe in the dust, doesn't it? Without an explanation, or at least an equivalent, less problematic replacement, like the Veneer's Wrath mentioned in the video game Heart of the Forest. You know, the game that was advertised as in continuity with W5 before they decided years later that, oh no, actually it wasn't. And I'm not even done. Gods, I wish I was done, but look. This book is filled with so-called questions. mysteries and stories for troops to answer. Some work, but most fall flat, because they usually boil down to no one remembers this thing because oral tradition is so unreliable, when in fact logic states that plenty of people were there and should know, and completely ignoring the fact that there's an entire hospice whose whole entire fucking point is to make sure oral tradition is reliable. I'm sorry, but a mystery just isn't a mystery if I can't even believe it's even a question in the first place, or if it can be solved with a phone call, or worse, just by talking to a Glade child for 5 minutes. You know, the spirits whose entire concept, at least W5's version of them, is knowing things, and who are extremely likely to exist in most sept where these events took place. Anyway, one mystery this game presents is, can we trust Wolf? Which, to be fair, is a damn cool question. But it was asked in the absolute worst possible way. See, they put Wolf as the patron of the cult of Fenris, and he's cool with the fact that his tribe is on this path of death and destruction that only actually helps the worm. You know, I don't think I even need a phone call or a Glade child to solve this one. Let's be honest. If Wolf fell, then the Garou fell, and then there's no game. And so the entire setting crumbles with this one stupid question. Doubling down on this, because I am still not done, they tied this question to the fact that Cult of Fenris members can choose to stop following Wolf and join other tribes where they are mistrusted for once following Wolf. Oh, what tension and what great drama this will bring, the book thinks to itself. Except one cannot ever return from Oglosk. That's a raw fact. Rules as written fact. Meaning they might leave Wolf and the cult, sure, but they will always and forever be irredeemable, dangerous even for other Garou. Murderous, extremists, maniacs, lost to Oglosk. And that's why it's not drama and it's not mystery. They will never be trusted. They can't be. It's not a question. It's not debatable. And yes, I know there is an item to lower your Ogloss a little bit. I know it's there. But here's the thing. Once you change your state into this Ogloss state, in other words, when you reach 5, your character is no longer playable. It is too far gone. This item does not exist to bring you back from Ogloss. It exists to prevent you from getting there. Once you have reached Ogloss, you're fucked. That's it. End of story. Tear out your character sheet. In other words, W5 did they get a huge disservice. The hugest of disservice. Based on a vision of the tribe founded on a truly abysmal understanding of them, ignoring and abandoning all of its fans. And I'm going to stop here before I get really nasty in my criticism. Come back next episode as we turn our eyes to the stormy skies with the Shadow Lord's tribe.